All right. Well, let's get started with our introductions now that we've talked a little bit about our favorite TV shows. But my name is Graciela, and I am going into my fourth year here at Western. My pronouns are she, they, and I am originally from Seattle, Washington. It's a very small town. I know no one's heard of it. And yes, that's a joke. Yeah, that's just a little bit about me. I have been involved in a couple of different things during my time here at Western. One of them was being a social media content creator for our club on campus called Planned Parenthood Generation. And then the other is the Latinx Student Union, or LSU, which is one part of our cultural clubs here on campus. So that's just a little bit about me. And I'm going to hand it off to Jude to give her introduction.
Hi, y'all. My name is Jude Ahmed. I am a fourth year student at Western, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am a political science and economics major and a German major, maybe a minor. We don't know yet. Depends on my graduation time. And I am also pretty heavily involved on campus, both in some of the different clubs in the Ethnic Student Center, such as African Caribbean Club and the Middle Eastern Student Association. And then I also am very involved in the Associated Students as a whole, which is a student-run managed organization that's kind of part managing all of the clubs we have at Western, part managing a bunch of resources and tools for students to succeed on campus, that we'll get to talk a little bit about with the MCC, and then also part student government. So you'll kind of usually find me running around the Viking Union when we are able to be on campus.
Yeah, hey everyone, my name's Elizabeth. I am a transfer student here at Western. So I've been at Western now, it's gonna be my third year. I came from Columbia College in Tri-Cities, Washington, and I am an elementary education major with a minor in education and social justice. So everything that I'm kind of doing at Western, academic wise, is all surrounding education, which is great because that's kind of where my passion lies. When I'm not kind of in classes or in my practicums, which is essentially just when I'm in classrooms around Bellingham teaching lessons, I'm likely going to be studying in the MCC. And I like to put that in quotes because a lot of times I'm just talking with friends like Graciela or Jude. And sometimes that's the only time I see Jude because she's just running around in and out of the building. But it's always nice. And around campus, when I'm not kind of doing that, I've attended different LSU meetings, so Latinx Student Union, but I've also joined a variety of different events that are hosted by the ESC. So I've gone to several conferences and heritage dinners and just different events around campus that take place either outside of the MCC or within the MCC. But when I'm not doing any of that, I'm just going to be home. I need to be by myself a little bit to re-energize, watching shows and things like that. But yeah, that's going to be a little bit about me, and we're going to go ahead and jump into the rest of this Curious Minds meeting. So
I totally forgot to mention my major. My major is human services, and I'm minoring with anthropology. The human services major is through the Woodring College of Education, if any of you are interested in searching that. But before we get started and fully diving in, it really is important for all of us to acknowledge the land that Western stands upon. And specifically for the Bellingham area, we are on the Coast Salish land, which is the ancestral homelands for specifically more recently the Lummi Nation and the Nooksack tribe. It is important for us to acknowledge the lands because we are provided with so many privileges by taking up space here and by taking over resources and things like that. And we really appreciate these two sovereign nations for their enduring care in these lands and waterways in our area, because it is a very beautiful area if y'all ever get to visit the Bellingham scene. So yeah, that's just a little dive in. I hope that wherever you are located right now, you also take a time to think about the privileges that you're given by taking up space in these areas. So there is that. All right, and we are going to move on to talk a little bit about the Multicultural Center, which is the whole point of this session, but I also want to shout out Grant, who is in the chat for the YouTube Live right now, and you are welcome to ask any of the questions that you have for us throughout this event, and Grant will make sure that we get to them and answer any and all of the questions that you have. But first and foremost, Jude, do you think that you want to start with maybe talking about the Multicultural Center and its history?
For sure. And then I also just want to take a moment to introduce y'all to Miriam. She is working in the Student Advocacy and Identity Resource Center this year and just started that position. And so she has also been super involved in a lot of the offices in the Multicultural Center and involved in events. And so we're really happy to have her here today. She's got a little bit of technical difficulties, but is there any chance your audio is going now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Cool.
So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and then feel free to like hop into our discussion at any time.
Sure. Okay. Let's see. Hi. My name is Mariam. I use she, her pronouns. I am a 5th year here at Western studying biocultural anthropology. I have been involved with a few ESC clubs like the African Caribbean Club, the Mixed Identity Student Organization, and I'm just starting my position at the SERC with the Student Outreach and Advocacy position.
Awesome. So I'm going to jump into talking a little bit about what the Multicultural Center is. The Multicultural Center is made up of a few different parts. And we'll get into a little bit of the history of that as well. But just for an overview, one of those parts is going to be our Ethnic Student Center. The Ethnic Student Center is comprised of about 19 identity-based clubs. Another office in there is going to be the Student Advocacy and Identity Resource Center, or the SERC, that Miriam is a part of. And this actually hosts a variety of different offices within it. And so we have offices like the Disability Outreach Center. We have our Queer Resource Center. We have the Blue Resource Center for undocumented students. And then, oh my gosh, am I blinking and missing any other aspects of the SERC?
Can you, which ones you mentioned?
The DOC, the QRC, and then the, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking right now.
As well as the Women's Identity Resource Center.
Yes.
Women's spelled with an X instead of an E.
Yes. And then the other one was the Blue Resource Center. Thank you. And so these are a bunch of offices under that kind of one umbrella term. And all these offices work pretty closely together with the ESC as well. And then also within the Multicultural Center, we have our LGBTQA plus Resource Center as well. And so we're going to get to go a little bit more in depth into all of these offices. But to talk a little bit about how the MCC came to be, this part of our campus, this building, was actually a really new addition. It just opened in the fall of last year. Beautiful window with a ton of spaces inside for students to study, lounge. We have some floor to ceiling windows, a kitchen, and some other spaces we'll get to dive more into. And this building was created through the work of our students. Our students have advocated for a very long time to create spaces that center these different underrepresented identities that we have on campus and provide an area for support, safety, community, and identity building. It wasn't an easy journey. Originally, all of these offices and, namely the ESC, were down in the 4th floor of our Viking Union building. And it was kind of tucked into the back, into a little corner. It had a very small capacity for students. And it was just kind of almost on the side of the university's vision, I'd say. So a lot of students had a difficult time accessing. Students notice it. It's in our Viking Union building. And so The offices in the Multicultural Center have a lot of opportunities to connect with the other resources and offices in the Viking Union as well. And this was an effort that took over 15 years and required the work of a lot of student advocacy throughout that time. So this is a very generational project. And there were so many alumni that came to speak at the opening that kind of talked about how, they started years ago getting involved in pushing for this space and pushing for a larger platform for our students. And then, to see the Multicultural Center opening officially, and then, also see all the collaborative work that the student employees are doing together to kind of create a better space on campus was definitely, very empowering to see at the time. And then one of the most important things that I do want to highlight is that, this space would not have happened without our founding ethnic student center clubs. And, in the context of the world that we're living in today, we really want to make sure that we're giving due credit to the communities that have pushed for this space. And so particularly want to highlight the Black Student Union and the Native American Student Union, who have been at the forefront of our advocacy. And, we're very grateful that all of these students from the past have worked towards something that we today have an opportunity to enjoy. And hopefully throughout this discussion, you'll get to see the different ways that we've really taken advantage of this space and kind of had found our friends and our fun and joy there too.
Yeah, and I'm going to share my screen right now to show a little bit of, oh, that's not what I was trying to show. Some images of the Multicultural Center. Let's see if this works. Do y'all see that? Okay, cool. Thank you for the thumbs up. So here's just a little bit of images of the Multicultural Center, and we'll show them throughout the whole session. But we just wanted y'all to know kind of what it looks like, because I know that it's hard with everything being virtual to really get a feel for these areas. And so here is kind of the entrance to the Multicultural Center, because we are at the top floor of the Viking Union with this quote that says, "Nothing about us without us is for us." So here to the left image, we have the Student Advocacy and Identity Resource Center built office spaces. So the ones that Jude mentioned, the Women's Identity Resource Center, Queer Resource Center, Disability Outreach Center, as well as, my goodness, I'm blanking out with them too, the Queer Resource Center and many more. And then on the other side, further down this hallway, we can see the Ethnic Student Center and their main desk. And here in between the CERC and the Ethnic Student Center, we have a little library with different cultural reads. There is some cool books from LGBTQ authors as well as BIPOC authors. And for those in our audience that may not know what the acronyms mean, I'm sure you know LGBTQ plus, but the BIPOC is for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And then here on the right is another beautiful area to sit and lounge in our Multicultural Center. We also have study spaces, which get pretty occupied during the school year. Maybe not so much now, but these are all resources that are available to you once you come to campus in a healthy and safe way. So yeah, those are just a couple of images, and I will stop sharing, but if anyone needs to see them again, go ahead into the chat and let us know. But yeah. And we will have a Q&A session specifically later on, but you can again ask questions at any point. Someone did ask us though, if they want to get involved in LGBTQ related things at college, but I'm not out to my parents, do you have any advice? I mean, personally, as someone who does identify as a queer person with my identity as well as my sexuality, I am not out to my parents either, but I still am involved with different LGBTQ events on campus. So I've gone to the drag race shows that our Queer Resource Center hosts every year. There are a whole bunch of different clubs, and no one is going to spread your information to your parents without your consent. Even with the events that LGBTQ Western hosts, they always ask permissions before like taking pictures, and knowing and letting you know that those, if they will take pictures, that they'll be posted online so that you have full control of when and how it, or even if you decide to come out to your family members. So just make sure that any involvement that you do on campus or off campus, it is your business on whether or not you want to decide to let your family in on your information in your personal life. Does anyone else want to add maybe something to that?
Yeah, totally. So like also along similar lines, like my identity in that regard is not something that I share with my family. But I do feel that it's been really nice to find a community at Western that understands that. And I feel like that there is a lot of safety and confidentiality measures that are taken even within, you know, non-official events, even in just small club meetings or gatherings, that, you know, students and staff do to take care of one another, and really try to manage and you know, try to make sure that you are able to participate and feel safe at the same time. And then I think, Miriam, did you have something you wanted to add as well?
Yeah, so I know that with Langley, so Langley is the LGBTQ plus coordinator at Western. I know that they can also help students when it comes to registering for classes, such as like queer studies or something like that. And it's this class that they are afraid will show up on their transcript that their parents might be able to see. So they can help that student find a way to say that's an independent study or something else on their transcript.
Yeah, so again, your privacy will be protected, and it is important for us that you are as safe as possible in many different ways. Thank you, Miriam, for that information.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
then this is kind of another like fun story, but I know that within like some of the clubs, the student-run clubs, like the Queer Trans People of Color Club, one thing that that community wanted to do was be able to keep in touch with students while they were home and they maybe weren't able to express their identity at home, and they were kind of trying to come up with like more like, you know, like I guess covert ways to be able to keep in touch with each other, and stay connected, whether it be like through meetings, or I know one thing that I joined was a letter writing network, and we kind of had, you know, some like guidelines set up for, you know, how are we going to send those letters, and like what kind of letterheads do students feel safe receiving, and that was just a really good way to keep up that community, but also help students feel like when they're, you know, at home and they're not fully able to express their identities, that they still can, you know, do so with their fellow students, even in a virtual and socially distant setting.
Yeah, and for students who are looking for specifically queer spaces, if you are starting school this fall, our LGBTQ plus Western department is hosting a queerientation, which is an orientation for queer students. I'm going to grab my notes real quick, so I'm going to pop out of the camera, but I'm going to pull up the information, but keep talking until I find my notes.
Oh, I think I have the date, Tuesday, September 29th. But I don't know if you have more details on that as well.
Yes, so it is the 29th. It is a live online event. It starts at 3 p.m. And if you just go to lgbtq.wwu.edu, you will pop up on their website and will be able to register. And overall, that website has some really great information for our LGBTQ students. So you can also sign up for one-on-one sessions with the director, which is Langley, and that is through Calendly, which I'll type into our chat so that our chat moderators can put into your chat on YouTube, because this is all very new to us to have a live stream, but that link will be included for y'all to be able to schedule one-on-one sessions with the director, which is a really cool opportunity if you feel like you need that space as an incoming student.
Yeah, and then continuing on, we can, if we want to like dive into talking maybe a little bit about the Ethnic Student Center in detail. I'm sure as y'all have heard, we all kind of have like our feet in some of the different clubs. And so Elizabeth, do you want to talk about like some of the clubs that are available and some of those like really fun events you mentioned going to?
Yeah, I can do that. So I've attended different meetings for LSU, which is the Latinx Student Union, on campus, and it's one of the various different Latinx-based like cultural clubs. So we have quite a few, like Baile Folklorico, the WW, so Western, and this is open for just any student who's wanting to learn how to do those traditional dances, and they also get to perform at different events like the LSU Heritage Dinner Nights, or we have an ESC Night Market, which is, I think, one of my favorite events that I've gone to on campus. We do also have like the Mariachi Bahia Azul, so a mariachi club, and then we have Mecha, which is a Movimiento Estudiantil Chicanx. So they talk a little bit more about different issues going on within the Chicanx community, and just different opportunities like that that they're granted for conferences and things like that too. But me specifically, I've attended LSU various times with Graciela and a few other folks, and they just do a lot of community-based things. So sometimes they are doing planning events for things like the LSU Heritage Dinner Night, but sometimes they're just talking about how they're doing, how their classes are going. They were planning a piñata kind of breaking night. So they were planning essentially at the beginning of a quarter, everyone was going to make piñatas, and then at the end of the quarter, they were going to get to hit them and like break them as a sort of releasing any, whatever you want to release, you know, metaphorically with a piñata. So that was a really kind of fun meeting. We also have like potlucks. So everybody kind of brings food, and it doesn't have to be like a super traditional whatever. Like some people brought pasta, some people just brought like ice cream, chips, soda, things like that. So it's just a way for students, and it's not has to be a student who identifies as that, it's open to all students, but it's just a way for students to build community and kind of have a moment of just fun, because I think a lot of times, especially as students of color, we're going to get caught up in all the stressors of not just like academia, but also everything just going on with your identity or just at home. I know for myself personally, I always have things on the back of my mind that are affecting me from home, even though I'm like 6 hours away right now, but it's still there. And having the clubs, it's like a nice way to break away from that for just like an hour or two. But some of the events that I've gotten to go to through the ESC, I think my first year while I was at Western, one of the first events I went to, and it was actually pretty late for me just because I was a little bit more hesitant to step out of my bubble, but it was the ESC night market, and I actually went with Graciela and her, some of her roommates and some of her friends, and that was, I think, one of the best nights that I had at Western. They had so many different clubs that were posted around the fountain that we have on the Red Square, and they were just selling food, but then they also had performances from different groups. So we had the Folklorico group perform. We also had groups performing from like Filipino backgrounds and Indian backgrounds. And so those different clubs, they were all doing a bunch of performances. And it was just a really cool thing to experience, to like as a group, and everyone just being there listening to the music and watching these performances and buying like agua de Jamaica, which, well, I know it as agua de Jamaica, but they were selling it as hibiscus tea, which is very traditional for NASU, which the Native American Student Union was selling that, but they were also selling like pan dulce, which is, you know, more traditional to Latinx kind of backgrounds, and just all these kind of fun things. So that was an amazing opportunity. And I've also gotten to go to the ESC Student of Color Conference. So that was something that I've gone 2 years in a row now. And that has been like a super big highlight. Not only is it in like an amazing location, we kind of went to an island, and I kind of forget what the name of the island is, but Jude probably know it. She can add it later, but we've gone there, and it's just like the sunrises are amazing. This last one that we went to, I was in Jude's group actually. She was like my mentor during that time, and we got to go to this like lighthouse and just do a bunch of fun things. But there was also a lot of sessions there for students of different identities to get to talk about community and what that means to them. Or there was one session, there you go, Jude showing a picture. There was one session that they were doing tarot reading. So they were talking about different like horoscopes and astrology and what your sign can mean and what different cards were. So, you know, there's just a whole bunch of different opportunities for students to get to know each other and continue building that community that they're started at Western, but outside of Western. So those are a lot of the things that I'm kind of most familiar with and that I've participated in, as well as the LSU Heritage Dinner Night, which that several different clubs. So the BSU also puts one on, as well as the Filipino Student Association. They put one on every year, and a few other clubs. But it's essentially just a place for students to, one, help fund that club by paying for a ticket to attend the dinner, but then also just experience also a whole bunch of different traditional cultural things and traditions from those particular backgrounds. So I've been to the LSU one, and that was super fun to see the different dances that they put on, but they also had a fashion show that I really enjoyed because I'm kind of used to one particular dress, like traditional dress type for like a Mexican person, but it kind of showed how it varies throughout even Mexico and the different states, but also in the different Latinx countries and things like that. So that was really fun. And yeah, I highly recommend anyone who goes to Western to check out those events and kind of buy those tickets to help fund those clubs and show their support, but also just to learn and have fun with a whole bunch of students and continue building that community if it's something that you're looking for. But yeah.
Yeah, Miriam or Jude, do you have any events that you think are super memorable to you?
Jude, can I go? Can y'all hear me? Okay. I would also say like the ACC Heritage Dinner is also like one of the highlights of my experience with the ACC. It was like a lot of like cultural dances. There was like a fashion show. We brought in folks from the community who had like a traditional like African shop here in Bellingham, and her name was oh gosh, I can't remember her name.
Christelle?
Huh?
Is it Christelle?
Yeah, Christelle. She helped kind of do that fashion show, and that was really awesome because everybody like was stunting. It was awesome. There's like food, photo booths, and for me, there was, I think 2 years ago, there was an Ethiopian. So my mom is Ethiopian. There was like an Ethiopian dance ceremony, and like it was just like they had like the traditional sitskitsa, which is like the shoulder dance and everything, and that was just so fun. And just like seeing all of that like happiness and like empowerment was really awesome.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool things about these events is that, especially for the heritage dinners, is that anyone really can buy tickets to those events. So like if your family wanted to come up to Bellingham and to join you and get a cool meal and engage in the culture that in the community that you have started, that is also a possibility.
Yes, definitely. My mom came to the ACC Heritage Dinner like 2 years ago, and she was like on stage with all the students, and she was just like having a whole time.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of it, is being able to share it with them too.
Yeah.
Y'all have me tearing up with all of these really good memories that I'm totally missing right now. Kind of because since you mentioned Christelle, Miriam, so Christelle is a local community member, and she had a store in the Bellingham Mall called Lucrest, where she sold traditional African clothing. And it was actually also through African Caribbean Club that I met her. And I started taking some of the photo. I was like the first photographer she had before like she could like hire someone to take photos for her online store. And that was really cool for me because that was probably only my second time ever photographing like people of color. And it was really nice to just like have the opportunity. It was really fun. I was just working with like a bunch of high school girls that you know had connected to Christelle and had kind of like gravitated towards her because they were like, oh my gosh, like another like there's an African business owner, and so we would like you know just have fun. They'd like throw on all these outfits and the full jewelry, and I do the photos for them, and they looked great on my photography Instagram, and hopefully really good on the website as well. And so that was just another like cool way. Like there's a lot of opportunities to connect not just with students through the Ethnic Student Center, but also through the community as well. And I've met a lot of awesome community members just from them attending these like club events or, you know, offering to like support club events or sponsor things. And so that was just like a cool, fun memory. I was like, oh my gosh, I remember Christelle. That was so long ago. I guess some other just like super fun events are honestly sometimes just the club meetings. Pretty much every club will have either like weekly or bi-weekly meetings. They all have boards, and those boards are kind of the ones that you know work together to plan the different meetings. And so some of them are like educational, some of them are purely fun, some of them might be like meetings to like hang out and like bake, and you know so they can have like a bake sale the next day. And so I remember one event that I did with the Arab Student Association and the Middle Eastern Student Association, and we did it with LSU. Was we basically just had like a potluck, and it was a really funny potluck because the like Arab and Middle Eastern Student Association was like 10 people, because there's not that many of us, and then LSU was like 60. And so we basically took up the entire MCC, and we were kind of trying to do like different games of like we were picking food items that were like similar across like our cultures. So we'd have like a rice dish. And then we would get people that weren't from like either club because it would have been unbalanced otherwise to kind of like do a little blind taste test. And so they'd have to just like, you know, guess randomly like, okay, did someone from like LSU make this dish, or did someone from like Arab Student Association make this dish? And, you know, they actually were pretty accurate because they'd be like, Jude's made me this before. And so they, you know, it was just really fun to have like a lot of like cross club interactions and do like games together, do like, you know, cute events like that together. Just lots of really good memories in the Ethnic Student Center and with the students there as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of having a newer and larger Ethnic Student Center space, is that there is more ability for them to, I don't want to say cross-pollinate because that sounds weird, but like interact with each other in a different way. Just because like when you go to the certain club and you're used to going to those weekly or bi-weekly meetings in that one group, but then you all kind of gather in the study space or in the kitchen space or whatever it is that you hang out, like you all kind of just hang out together. And I think that's one of my favorite parts of just studying and hanging out in that space. Yeah.
Can I also add, so it's also really nice when, so Jude mentioned it's nice that you get community within the MCC, but like outside community, outside of Western. But it's also nice when like clubs from the ESE go out into the community. So one event that we did, actually I went with Jude, and she's the one that told me to go because I didn't know about it otherwise. But I believe it was a Muslim Student Association who was raising funds for their club, and we went to Tandoori Bites. And I went with Jude and a few other people, and I thought it was going to be like, 5-10 people that were there. And it was like the entire half of the restaurant that was taken up. And we were kind of, we moved a whole bunch of tables, which is something that it's so funny to me because I've never seen it done outside of like my own family or like my own like cultures. Like everyone just assumes you can move, you know, your area around to accommodate you. But this was like, you know, we formed like a huge U like in the room, and everyone had a bunch of orders, and it was like, I don't know how many people were there, but it was such a fun night just to see so many familiar faces, but also meet so many different people. And then just on top of it, have a really amazing food. So that's also been really nice that a lot of times, you know, like this is an event talking about the MCC, but it kind of goes to show that it doesn't all just happen on campus within that building. It's like we also go out into the community just to visit different places and support different businesses that are BIPOC owned. So that's also super sweet. But yeah, so many amazing events to go to when we have the opportunity to, you know, safely and healthily, if that's a word, do all that again. But yeah.
One other event, or two events that I also want to shout out that haven't been talked about yet is the NASU Coastal Jam and Powwow that usually happens around the springtime. So beautiful. They usually take up the Carver Gymnasium and have a whole bunch of artists come onto campus, have beautiful dance shows and so much more, as well as the lowrider show, which I haven't been able to go to, but I know is a blast from the pictures. And for anyone wondering, that means that we have a whole bunch of lowrider cars drive onto Red Square and show off their cars, but we also have, again, different vendors with different food and cultural dances and things like that to show off, which is just amazing.
And then they do like a jump contest to see like whose car can like jump the highest, and you literally just have, and it's also very community event too. Like we get a lot of community members from like I think it's not just Bellingham, but I think even wider than that, coming just because they want to see the cars and they want to see the jump competitions, and it's really fun.
Yeah, so if you're into cars and you're into food, that's probably like the best place to go to during the springtime. But we did get a question from someone. It asks if you know if some clubs are still trying to operate during this time, especially during COVID, and if you do know of any, like how are they doing it? And Jude, you kind of mentioned that there were some clubs that were doing like letter campaigns. Does anyone know of any off the top of their head or have engaged in any that they would like to talk about?
I know with like the ACC, the Black Student Union, there's two other Black student-led clubs. They have a program called Siblings Plus, and like a peer mentoring program, and I options depending on how it's set up. You can like do in-person meetings, of course, safely and everything. And then you can also do like virtual hangouts depending on what you've signed up for. But there is like a peer mentoring program for like incoming Black students.
Yes, I have a link for that, which I will attach to the chat so that students have access to that if they're incoming and want to be a part of that.
Yes, please. I actually signed up to be a mentor for that program this year. And it seemed super successful last year. And, you know, I'm really excited to like see it grow from here on out too, even virtually as well. My other recommendation is if you are interested in any of those ESC clubs, I think one of the fastest ways to get updates on, you know, who's doing what is to go to the WSESC Instagram. And I can also have our chat mods put that in the YouTube chat. But this, so from here, this is basically the official Instagram for the entire Ethnic Student Center. And then like little cool pro tip is that the first story that they have, and I can kind of show it on my phone even if it's visible, but the very first story is going to say Club Instas, and you can actually use this to like, oh my gosh, click through it, and you can go to each of those clubs' Instagrams. So this is my club that I actually need to figure out if we're going to be doing anything this year too. And so yeah, so this is a great way to keep up to date. You know, literally on the minute they announce that there's a club meeting or that they announce what their plans are for the year, that's going to be a really great way to keep up to date with that. I do believe that some of the clubs are trying to figure out how they're going to be doing virtual sessions. pretty much almost every club continued having virtual meetings in the springtime. And they've all had their boards elected as well. And so definitely check out the clubs that we have available, and see which one that like you're interested in joining, and you feel like will fulfill your identity, and follow them, and even like DM them for updates if like you see they haven't posted anything. I think a lot of students are kind of still trying to figure out like, oh my gosh, like this is our kind of like our side activity, like our extracurricular. And so like we don't have experience in a situation like this. And so they're kind of trying to figure it out as well. But if I know anything about like the folks in the ESC is that they're pretty determined. So I think there's a good chance you'll be able to find some groups to engage with.
Yeah, it's super important to follow their social media, especially since most of us, like, let's be real, are already most of the time on social media. It's a great way to just keep up to date with all of those clubs. I do know that the Ethnic Student Center specifically was hosting events through spring quarter as well. Some of my personal favorites were the Harry Potter trivia night. They also had a Twilight trivia night. And I'm sure that they're only gonna continue with different themes throughout the rest of the school year. So yeah, there's always a way to find engagement, especially online. They're just gonna do the work to make sure that we all can find community in different ways. But we've talked a little bit about the Ethnic Student Center and the Multicultural Center as a whole. I do want to dive into a little bit more on the Student Advocacy and Identity Resource Centers. As we mentioned, there is the Women's Identity Resource Center, the Disability Outreach Center, as well as the Blue Resource Center and Queer Resource Center. Just to break them down a little bit, as a whole, they really work to provide different resources to students and support, and each subsection does their own work to help those specific groups of students. For example, the Women's Identity Resource Center does a lot of work to provide period products. So if you ever are in an emergency and need to find them, sometimes some bathrooms on campus do already have them, but the office or near their offices on the Viking Union, they also have some. Again, this is once campus is open and once the Viking Union is open, but it's still important to have that information. And sometimes they even give away reusable period products depending on your needs and when they have giveaways or events, just really important stuff. For the Disability Outreach Center for students with disabilities, we do have the Disability Access Center, which is different, that is located in Wilson Library. And that is specifically meant to help students get like proctored tests or be able to take their tests in a specific place instead of in the classroom like normal, or get any other assistance that is usually given to students with different learning disabilities. But the Disability Outreach Center works to kind of provide a little bit more support. So in case for some reason your professors suck and aren't listening to the Disability Access Center, the Disability Outreach Center does a lot of work to kind of bully professors to make sure that you get the work done the way that you deserve. And I don't mean like actual bullying, it's just giving them a push to be able to support you, because that's really important, because that's what you're paying for, a good education. All right, and then moving on, there's the Queer Resource Center, which I mentioned hosts the yearly drag show, which is very fun, but they also have different info sessions and support. Again, we also have the LGBTQ plus Western, so we have a lot of support for different students in different ways. And then the Blue Resource Center is for students who are undocumented. They give, again, different resource information in the Bellingham community and abroad as well, and not abroad, but like in general. Recently with COVID, because it was a really hard financial time for a lot of families, especially undocumented families, because they couldn't receive different grants due to federal funding restrictions, they made sure to give a lot of information to students to make sure that not only them, but their families can stay safe and healthy during these times. So very valuable resource centers on our campus. And Miriam just started a position there. And if you would like to maybe talk about your position and what you hope to do during your time in that position.
So just before I jump into that, there's a few other parts of SERC too that I wanted to mention. There's also the Veterans Resource Center and the Legal Resource Center. And because of the situations surrounding COVID, we also have the Western Hub of Living Essentials, or acronym is WHOLE, and that's kind of like a free food pop-up situation to assist students who are facing some type of food insecurity. Can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can. Sorry. Yeah, the whole is really awesome. They have different, during a regular school year, they usually have a location in the Buchanan Towers, as well as the Viking Union, and then another pantry in the Multicultural Center, just for reference. But they have been doing some amazing work during COVID times to make sure that students with food insecurity can still have access to meals.
And then, so for the student advocacy position, so that's just kind of like another resource on campus that's basically filled by students. So it's kind of like a opportunity for student interaction and student engagement. And sorry, there's some background noises, but that's kind of an opportunity for a student to provide resources or mentorship or anything like that. So in my position, I'll have office hours. And that's, I think, pretty much a similar situation for most ESC club positions or AS club or AS positions, is that most students have office hours too. And then, so the reason why I decided to apply for this position was to sort of take some of the parts of my experience at Western, so being a student of color and sort of helping students navigate those certain areas as a student and those spaces to sort of make the most of their time at Western. And something that's stood out to me with SERC was just how many different offices there was under SERC, and how many opportunities there was to do outreach and to provide mentorship or resources to students. And something that I kind of want to do in my position is there's a lot of community aid groups that are going on throughout Bellingham. And I'm trying to figure out a way to sort of link those groups and make it more accessible for the student body, even though it is an AS position, just trying to allow students to realize, hey, there's other places off campus that are great resources too.
That's really amazing. And that sounds like it's going to be some hard work, but also it's going to be so valuable at the end of the day with how many students and community members you'll be able to help out.
Yeah, I'm psyched.
And all of the offices in the SERC as well put on like large and fun events throughout the year too. I know that one that I collaborated with them on in my job last year was Western Intersectional Lobby Day, where we had the SERC and the ESC, and then also the environmental. Oh my gosh, I keep blanking on the names of the offices. We also have an environmental office as well, and all three of them kind of came together to create like an agenda and send students to Olympia free of charge, and like pay for their hotel and food and stuff. to go and like lobby legislators and try to get them to, you know, pass certain legislation that students kind of put their input into building. And so that was like a fun event I organized. I feel like, Miriam, that was kind of how I met you, was when you got your stuff stolen, which, you know, doesn't always happen, but
Yes, that is true. I think that was like a chance where I'm like, oh, hey, Jude, like I've seen you a few times, so hey, like
my bag got stolen. You want to help? Yeah. So it's, you know, also really awesome. Like, definitely follow all of these offices on their social media as well. I know they're all still working on doing programming virtually. And like reach out to folks like Miriam for like advice or help or for resources. Because there's a lot of students that, you know, have jobs on campus, but even though it's their job, they're like really looking forward to helping students find all these like cool resources that not everyone knows about.
Yeah, and I think the office that you were thinking of, Jude, was Western Sustainability. Was that the one?
There's another one. There's environmental and sustainability programs, the ESP.
Yeah, the lobby days are actually a lot of fun. I know that sometimes it can sound like, oh, lobbying, going to Olympia, that sounds boring. But also, one, you make friends, which we made a whole bunch of friends the last time we went. And two, like Jude mentioned, free food and free hotel. I don't know what else you can ask for. Elizabeth and I stayed in the same hotel, and I think that was fun. So yeah, so again, there's different ways to get involved on campus and so many variety. Even if you don't end up getting involved with the cultural clubs on our campus, we have so many other like academic clubs and social clubs that you are able to get involved in. And I think that's the beauty of going to college, is that you have so many options that it's really up to you to kind of build your own experience. Yeah. What are any clubs that y'all have been involved in that aren't like ESC specific, but that you think you found a great community in, if any?
So one thing I did last year, and it was through the Women's Identity Resource Center, was memoirs. And memoirs was essentially we kind of came together in a group, and it was for like students that identified as female or non-binary primarily. And we basically, the kind of goal of memoirs was at the end, we were going to showcase some sort of like art piece or like expression that we develop over the course of a quarter. And the way we developed them was like, we'd honestly just have meetings where we like hang out and do like fun stuff together. So we had like a little like mini like STEM party because one of the members in our group worked for the Disability Outreach Center, and they were like, oh, we do STEM party events like all the time with the DOC. Let me bring some of those over, and we can just like, you know, have a day where we like mess around with all these and you know, just like and kind of talk and get to know each other. And so we do like all like sorts of fun stuff like that throughout the quarter. And unfortunately, because of coronavirus, we never got to actually showcase our work, but that was meant to be in the spring quarter of last year. But that was one really fun event. It'll be really interesting to see if this year they're able to do that virtually in some form. And how that continues in years forward, but definitely be on the lookout for that. It was a really fun like group project art thing to join through the Women's Identity Resource Center.
And Jude, for those of us that aren't cool enough, what does a STEM party mean?
So stimming is, I don't know if I can like describe this super accurately, but stimming is the idea was to get a bunch of like small items that kind of like engage your touch senses. It's very like relaxing, and it's primarily it's something that the Disability Outreach Center tries to like kind of like do almost a little bit of like outreach and like get students to try it, because a lot of people don't realize that like sometimes like certain sensory touch feelings can help with a lot of like you know, anxiety, mental health, but also, you know, a lot of like neurological like tics or diseases or disabilities that students might have. And I don't know if I'm explaining it perfectly right, but it would be something like playing with like sand or those little like Orby balls. One thing was like a slinky, and it like felt weird on your arm, and it was really fun.
They also have those little cubes that have like the little buttons, the clicks, the switches, all of those things that kind of distract your hands, but in a way focus your mind to whatever is going on. So yes, that just for the folks who may not know what that is. And yeah, so I think for me, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I was involved in Planned Parenthood Generation, which was a club that I was involved in and I did social media for. And that was really fun. Again, just not only in being able to engage in community, but to also be active in other forms, especially politically. And again, for anyone across any spectrum of ideas or kind of foundation of thought, like there are clubs for that too. So it's really up to you on what you look for in our campus. Because I know that may not be everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay. But moving on, I'm going to talk about, something that I didn't go deep into, but I do want to talk about is that we do have gender neutral restrooms across campus. And I'm going to have to look for the link of the actual locations for every restroom. But I wanted to let y'all know that that is also options that we have on campus.
And as she's looking for that, aside from also having those gender neutral restrooms, we also do have gender neutral housing for students who are looking to live on campus, you know, if a school year was a little bit more normal, but even now how everything is working, we do still have gender neutral communities and housing that you can seek. So when you're applying for your housing and all that for Western, you can just check off this little, like a simple little mark that says you want to be included within that community, and then you can get the gender neutral housing that way. But
yeah, so there's the link in the chat so that that can be put for y'all and so that y'all can have access to that. Again, it's really important for you to be able to find ways to feel comfortable with yourself, because college is all about exploring who you are. And I mean, like, your whole life is about growing and exploring who you are, but college, I feel like, is a really kind of concrete time where that happens. I don't know about the rest of y'all. So yeah, I think something else we can talk about, since we're towards possibly the end of our time. One second. Yeah, since we're close to the end of our time, I want to just make open space for questions. So if anyone has any questions, we'll take them now, so that we can respect everyone's time on your participation with this.
This is a good one. Do you have any general tips or advice for navigating a predominantly white and cis and straight institution? Elizabeth, go.
I was just gonna say, Jude, you asked the question. Do you have an answer? I think for me, my biggest thing has just been really like finding a community for myself. So definitely checking out the opportunities that we've been talking about and all the different like offices that we have and clubs and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's also just like meeting people that you feel truly comfortable with. And, you know, while yes, I've attended the LSU, it's like, it's not like that entire club is someone that I'm like seeking advice for, or like comfort or whatever. Whenever I need that, it's like just also singular people that I've met through different avenues. So through my education program, I'm a tour guide on campus. So through Jude and Graciela, so like those people, but then also different people that I've met through the conferences that I've gone to, or the just walking into the MCC, like those kind of situations. Just there's like building that community that you feel that you can really like trust, and that kind of embody who you want to be or who you are looking to for advice or things like that. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is just really finding the community that works for you because, you know, especially as someone who's so far away from home, it can be hard leaving all of that behind and leaving everything I essentially ever knew into a new space that's like completely different atmosphere. You know, the people are different, the population, the demographic is different, like everything is just so different. So just really finding that community that you know is going to be there for you, and start talking to them, and eventually create group chats that you know are open to discuss anything and everything. But that's kind of my biggest tip, is just really find those people that are going to be your like fundamental kind of people in this new space that you're in. But also, of course, check out all the different events and clubs and things that we've talked about, because that's where you're going to find a lot of those people. But yeah, that's kind of like my biggest thing.
Yeah, my other biggest thing about being in a predominantly like white, cis, and straight institution is taking up space. I think I have to constantly remind myself as a first generation student, as a person of color, like I worked so hard to get here and no one is going to shut me up, because I worked so hard. I like all the sweat, all the tears of elementary school, middle school, high school, like even college now. Like I worked hard to be here, and I'm going to take up space. I'm going to learn. I am going to engage. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to do everything that I came here. I'm going to get my money's worth. So I think that's just kind of a reminder that I always have to tell myself, as well as taking care of myself and my mental health. That's really important. So yeah. And speaking of which, we got a question about mental health support systems and clubs. We do have our mental health centers on campus, so students can reach out and talk to a counselor. They aren't meant to be long-term counselors, but they'll help connect you to therapists in the community if that is something that you're looking for. And I don't know if we have, no, I know we do have different clubs that talk about mental health, but I don't know the names off the top of my head. But if any of you do have some, please shout them out.
I know, oh, sorry, Jude. I know one that just started up is within like, so I don't know if this is kind of common throughout the different colleges we offer at Western. So Western is kind of like the umbrella term for different colleges around in Western. And one of them is Woodring College of Education. And they actually, one of the students and a few others just started up the Educators for Self-Care Club. So they're really focusing on both like self-care, but then also trying to work in like an anti-racist, I don't want to say curriculum, because it's not like a set thing, and it's not like a curriculum you'd find around Bellingham or in different school districts, but just how to really implement all of those things, both within your self-care, but also as future educators, whether it's in state or anywhere else you go to. So I know that that is a club that actually, it just started, and that was kind of born out of COVID and being home, and the structure that everyone kind of had suddenly being lost. So that is one that I know of.
Okay, I can think of two. One of them is the National Alliance on Mental Health Club on Campus WW. And this is specifically a club that works to destigmatize mental illness. And they have a lot of like educational events and activities, but I've also seen a couple instances where usually they collaborate with a few like other clubs or with the associated students, to kind of host like wellness and like mental health like events. And so I remember there was one last year that I went to super late when it was almost done, but they gave me bubbles. And that's like the smallest thing, but I really needed those bubbles that day. And so you can always be on the lookout for different events like that. They'll try to also provide, you know, resources, and just other kind of like opportunities to do self-reflection and connect with the community and really work to destigmatize mental health. Another club that I'm a part of, it's not really like officially a mental health club, but it's called Happy Club, and it is a positive psychology club. And kind of the whole goal of it is to create like just a community where people feel comfortable talking and reflecting on like themselves and their experiences. It's a very comfortable, like safe environment, super friendly people. Like every time you go, you know, like everyone's gonna run up to you and be like, hi, like, you know, like, what's your name? Welcome. Thank you for joining. Like, how can we make you comfortable? And, you know, they kind of balance some like deep reflective conversation and, you know, kind of talking openly about mental health with just like fun self-care activities. And even doing like tools and strategies to, you know, help stay positive, help take care of yourself when you're at a low, and then a lot of like community bonding activities as well. So we've done like barbecues. I remember last year I missed it, but they did like a bike ride through Boulevard Park where they like rented bikes for all the members, and that looked super fun. And then even just the meetings themselves, great atmosphere, and it was very much something that I, you know, told myself like Thursdays at 5. This is my self-care for the week that I need to do, and I would go to that club meeting, and I would always leave feeling very emotionally released, and just really happy to be surrounded by like a good group of people.
I don't know if it's the same club you're talking about, Jade, but us during finals week, there is also always a club in like a office that comes out. I've seen them around the Viking Union, but I'm sure they're also like in Red Square and things like that. But they hand out like kind of goodie bags almost with different like de-stressing things. So one time I got Play-Doh, which I hadn't played with in like forever. And that night I just played with Play-Doh a whole bunch for like, I took a break between my homework for like an hour and just played with like the Play-Doh that they offered. But then they also give, like Jude said, bubbles and some like stress ball kind of things, and just little snacks and things like that. But that's also, you know, it's not like an official club or anything, but it comes out of one of the offices that we have. And they're just like there, especially during finals week when things kind of hit you know, everyone's a little stressing a little bit harder than usual. So that's definitely around. I did see a question that says, what are the Hispanic Latinx clubs like? Graciela, do you want?
Yes,
Do you have an
sorry.
answer for
I
this?
was also
No, you're good.
of two other resources for mental health is I believe in the campus services building, they have a Happy Light, which is to help students with seasonal affective disorder. So if the fall time and the dark time here in the Pacific Northwest hits you a little harder, that is also a resource. Not necessarily or inherently a mental health resource, but around finals week, like a lot of college campuses, we have a lot of dogs come onto campus. So you have a great time petting little animals. Well, it's mostly like dogs and cats, but that is a good resource on campus. And then in terms of what are the Hispanic slash my goodness, Latinx clubs like, my tongue was not having a good time there. Yeah, I mean, as we kind of mentioned, when it comes to cultural clubs, part of it is giving knowledge to community members about different topics within our cultures. Part of it is just having fun, de-stressing time, and also just like, again, community. We have those potlucks, we have different Like, for example, I think Mecha was doing a fundraiser to go down to, I think, Arizona for a conference. And one of the fun events that they had was they did a loteria, which is basically like a Mexican bingo for those that may not know what that is, to fundraise for their trip, which was a really cool event because at the end it was a giveaway for students too. So yeah, that was just kind of some of the things that our clubs offer. Again, they also do cultural dances throughout the school year at different events. But yeah, it's kind of really what you make of it. Also, if you join these clubs and you want these clubs to do these kind of events or this kind of outreach, maybe you can run to be on the boards, and then you can create the schedules and you can create the meetings based on what you need and what you think other students like you need too.
Yeah, I was also just going to add another event that they often do is I don't know the official name of it, but every year around the Dia de los Muertos time, they kind of come together with Whatcom Community College and they do like a big event, and they always ask different Latinx clubs, especially if it's something that they want to be interested in participating in, whether it's volunteering, offering to get like food or any other kind of thing that's needed for that time is also something that they do. But I did want to really quickly just talk about, or not talk about, but name the different clubs that could be, I guess, referred to for Latinx and Hispanic communities. So we have Baile Folklorico, the WW, we have Blue Group that's open for all undocumented students. We also do have the LSU, which is the Latinx Student Union. We have Mariachi Bahia Azul, so Mariachi Club. We do have Movimiento Estudiantil Chicanx, so Mecha that we mentioned, and we also do have a MISO group, so Mixed Identity Student Organization, for those who have Latinx and Hispanic kind of backgrounds or identities, but then as well as whatever else you identify as. So those are kind of a few of the clubs that we offer on campus that would fit, I guess, that particular community. But yeah, really what Graciela said, she kind of covered it.
Thank you. All right, and I think because we do want to respect everyone's time and our panelists' time, we just are going to wrap up. We're going to say thank you so much for all of your questions, your engagement. Thank you, Miriam, for joining us and giving a little bit of your input as a student as well as a student employee. My throat's a little dry. And I hope that wherever you end up in college, that you find community with people that make you feel excited about college, that make you feel excited about what you're studying. Yeah, and I think wherever you end up, it's really kind of your job to reach out to these places and to create community and to reach out to people and to get involved, because that's the only way you're going to have fun. Unless you're an introvert, then go ahead, don't talk to people. That's totally up to you. You know, it's just like the college experience is what you make of it. If you have any specific questions in terms of Western, we always recommend to reach out to our admissions office, either through social media like our Western Instagram or Snapchat accounts, where you can talk to some of our tour guides, or you can talk to our admissions counselors. We are going to be hosting multiple events throughout the school year so that y'all can get involved. We have some big ones coming up in October. Yeah, so just make sure that you reach out for different information. And if any of y'all have anything else to say, I think this will be the end. Yeah. All right. Again, thank you so much. We are so excited to hopefully have y'all on campus soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.